This week on The Futurists, Zoltan István.
I don't want to see people on the streets with pitchforks. I don't want to see riots. I don't want to see damage done because half the people can't find enough food to eat or they can't afford their rent. I want to see a transhumanist society progress safely into the Star Trek era. But in order to get to that better life, we all have to go together.
Hey there, welcome back to The Futurist. I'm Rob Tersick with my co-host, Brett King. Hey, buddy, how you doing?
I'm good. Yeah.
World traveler, you back?
Home in Bangkok for a little while now before we get ready to go to Dubai for September 22nd and 23rd for the Futurist Summit.
Very excited about that event. You've been working mighty hard to get that to happen. So we have MasterCard.
4 years of work.
We've got other sponsors lined up for it and great futurists from around the world, including today's guest.
Yes,
will
absolutely.
Be there in person.
Yeah. No, it's going to be a great event. We've got what is the largest gathering of the top 50 ranked futurists in the world. Wow. So it's going to be phenomenal. And, we've been working on this toolset, AI-based toolset, which has been trained on the content from the Futurists, which we're incorporating into the event. So it's, if you want to see how AI can be used in real time in a conference or an event, it's great. But in terms of sort of broad public policy stuff and things like that, we have some amazing content, and people coming. Professor Brian Cox, astrophysicist, opening on day one, day two, Commander Scott Kelly, who we had on the show previously, but spent over a year in space, 520 odd days, I think, commanded the shuttle, commanded the International Space Station for close to a year, and just a lot of really cool people. So really jazzed about that.
And that event is happening in Dubai on the 22nd and 23rd of September, and you can learn more about it at futuristevent.com. That's futurist singular, event, one word, .com. Check it out.
It's a great URL too, right?
I've been wanting to bring this together as a real-world event for some time because we've been building this kind of global network of people who think about the future. We've always thought it'd be fun to meet in person, and I can't think of a better city than Dubai to do this in.
I agree. I mean, look, there are sort of, I know this is going to maybe a controversial statement for some, but I think the three most future-proofed economies on the planet today are probably the UAE, Saudi, and China. You could probably also put South Korea in there, but that have next generation infrastructure and the type of policy environment that enables them to embrace what's happening in the future rather than sort of trying to roll back or protect from these changes. So
turning back the hands of time. Well, that's a timely way to introduce our guest for today's show.
Yeah,
Brett, you prepared such a nice intro. Yeah. Why don't you start by telling us who's on the show?
Well, it's a returning guest. Today's guest is Zoltan István. He's a best-selling author. He's a futurist, hence having him on the show. He's the founder of the Transhumanist Party. He ran for U.S. president aboard a coffin-shaped immortality bus. He's written for Wired and for New York Times, and he invented the extreme sport of volcano boarding. We're going to have to get into that. He's on a mission to make death optional. But until then, he's still very much alive and caffeinated, apparently, in Mill Valley, California, where he is running for a governor. Get ready to dive into longevity, AI, universal basic income, digital immigration. I think let's try to at least understand why Zoltan is the only political candidate ever to have suggested replacing your organs with upgraded hardware. Zoltan, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me back. I really appreciate it.
Very cool. So
intro, very thorough. You raised so many topics, Brett.
You're running for governor, Zoltan. This is pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm running for California governor as a Democrat this time, and it's interesting. Gavin Newsom is being timed out, and we have the state seems to have some issues going on. In fact, many issues, and I'm going to do my best to bring out policy that can fix those issues.
Now, there's no shortage of politicians in California, and there's plenty of Democrats amongst them. What makes you think that you're going to be able to displace the Democrats who've been waiting patiently for their turn to take a bid for governor?
Well, there's, of course, no guarantee that I can, win. I do think I can be competitive, though, and I think I can make the debates, and I think I can bring up some really interesting futurist issues in those debates. We saw what Mandini did in New York City, though. So the field in the Democratic Party is wide open right now. Honestly, there's a lot of change needed. The Democrats were really upset that Trump won, and he won pretty decisively. And so I think they're looking for new blood. And I'm hoping after, I guess 14, 15, 16 years of kind of running for office here, trying to do different things, maybe they're going to say, wow, well, let's take a futurist. And of course, you might know I just recently finished my graduate studies at Oxford. So hopefully my resume is a bit more stacked and comparable to a lot of those other major candidates. They may have experience in the government, but I bring a wealth of different type of information, the kind of information and policy that I think can really lead California back to its glory days.
Here's the thing, Zoltan. I mean, I've known you now for, I don't know, 7, 8 years, right? But the thing is that I'm surprised, and this is the question for you. Are you surprised that there's not more people running for office talking about the impact of AI on jobs and how we're going to deal with it? Of course, Andrew Yang, was probably one that we could, also bring out as well. But it's far and few between. And given the rate of change we're experiencing, which is putting obvious pressure on the system, you could argue Trump is indeed a response to that sort of rate of change that's happening. Why aren't we having more very open conversation about the need for policy adaptation to, handle this future that's emerging?
Well, let me just say first, one of the primary reasons I'm running is because of artificial intelligence. I'm a complete believer that over the next year, 2, 3 years, it's going to start taking so many jobs that there's really going to be a disruption to society. You're going to see, I think, I don't know if there'll be riots, but it'll certainly be, big giant street protests and things like that over robots taking jobs, just because I have to question even myself, who comes sort of from, I used to be sort of this libertarian minded person, and I've been turning left because of AI. I can't see a way that the future can unfold successfully for humanity without more government support through like a universal basic income and protection of people's lives, because capitalism has created this thing called artificial intelligence. It's going to be smarter than us soon. It's going to have humanoid robots that can do all sorts of tasks. So how can we be competitive, especially in a capitalistic market? The truth is we probably can't. And that is going to make millions and millions of people across the United States and around the world deeply upset with the set of circumstances. I would not be surprised to see pitchforks in the streets in a couple years' time.
I mean, it is a, Rob, you tell me, but this is a consistent theme we keep coming back to, is that the capitalism is going to drive this level of automation because that's the most efficient form of corporation you can have, humanless corporations. But in the same time, it creates these massive problems for, equitable quality of life, all of those things. And, I know that you've had some faith that, we'll create new jobs that are displaced by this. But I think
that faith.
Yeah. I think it's just going to be so jarring. It's not going to happen cleanly and slowly and in a controlled fashion.
But let's get real. California is the ground zero for AI. This is the state where all the innovation is happening. This is the state where the companies that set the pace for innovation in artificial intelligence are located. They care deeply about that future. They're competing fiercely, not just amongst themselves, but also with Chinese innovators who are putting some serious pressure on. So, Zoltan, how can you possibly hope to make a dent in that when the wealthiest and most powerful people in California are those who are highly in favor of artificial intelligence?
Well, I think you really have to be realistic. You have to talk to those billionaires and those CEOs and say, listen, AI works until the people rise up, until the people really say something. And you just, again, saw this.
The government isn't in place to deal with future scenarios, right? Government reacts to situations on the ground, right? So it's impossible to pass laws for future scenarios. That's why we've had so much trouble dealing with climate change, for instance. It's always a reactive process. How can you possibly propose legislation to solve a problem that doesn't really exist yet?
Yeah, I mean, it's a consistent theme we keep coming back to, is that the industry is going to drive this level of automation because that's the most efficient form of corporation you can have, humanless corporations. But I think
Well, I'm not sure it's only just new laws. Sometimes it's just a type of leadership. I mean, again, going back to New York City and Mandini, here you have someone who's clearly on the socialist side, but he seems to have hit a nerve. Now, I'm not a socialist, but I think we can hit a nerve in California. And if you can get people thinking about the future and people thinking about AI and what it's going to do, you might put enough pressure on those CEOs and those billionaires to say, wait a sec, we have to come up with a solution. The solution is actually very simple. It's not a big deal. You're going to have to tax the people that make super huge amounts of money, and you're probably going to have to establish a universal basic income so that those who lose their jobs to robots have a way to continue their lives forward, shelter, medicine, health, food, things like that,
Okay.
and maybe even travel expenses and fun.
Okay, you raised two important topics that are very timely. One is raising taxes, and the other one is this concept of a universal basic income, which turns up from time to time on this show like a bad penny. We can't seem to get away from it. First, we're in a mode where Americans want to cut taxes. I mean, that's clear, right? The party that controls two branches of the U.S. government is doing their very best to slash costs, kind of with a meat cleaver, not a very surgical process, and reduce taxes, particularly taxes for the wealthiest people. Are you proposing to reverse that? Would you seek to raise taxes on the wealthiest people? And wouldn't that
or
just
is there new sources of revenue from AI?
Well, I hope there'd be new sources of revenue, but yes, I'm absolutely suggesting to raise taxes on the super rich at this point. I mean, and this is something you wouldn't have heard from me 2-3 years ago, but I have seen the future. I was at this crazy end of the world AI party, over on the ocean in a 30 million mansion just last week or 2-3 weeks ago that Wired covered, and nobody had a solution to what's happening. In fact, the entire conversation is about this worthy successor, like what will happen to superintelligence after us. So I'm now realizing like that ship has left. We're really about to face this cataclysmic event with AI taking millions of jobs and people being left under the bridge. We're going to have to do something. And listen, this isn't me trying to be some bleeding heart person. This is just pragmatic. I don't want to see people on the streets with pitchforks. I don't want to see riots. I don't want to see damage done because half the people can't find enough food to eat or they can't afford their rent. I want to see a transhumanist society progress safely into the Star Trek era. But in order to get to that better life, we all have to go together. And I think the billionaires and the CEOs have to realize that. So we're going to have to force some of these things down their throat. They just can't keep Elon Musk can't just have $1 trillion. At some point, there has to be a breaking point where a lot of that money flows back.
Yeah, but if you're the governor of California, you can't tax Elon Musk. He moved to Texas, so he's going to...
I got it. But there is a perception change there. We'll do what we can if I was governor. But, and I'm not pretending that I'm going to be able to change everything overnight. This is like a giant Titanic ship. It takes forever to steer something. At the same time, though, having a voice out there that's different, that's
you got to have the conversation.
Yes. And I think you would start getting other people saying, look, let's run like this person. Let's run in a futurist perspective. Maybe if we get enough governors, enough politicians supporting UBI, maybe we at least establish that. And then we can have different conversations after that. If people have enough food and the shelter and things like that, we can get inflation under control. All of a sudden, it might be a better world to look at where the AI future is coming. But right now, I agree with you. Look, I'm not trying to pretend I'm going to pass laws that are going to change California overnight. But just having somebody up there that is speaking different could be the change that we need in the United States.
Okay, sure. Let's talk about UBI. You brought it up a couple times. We've had it on the show before. I'll be very candid with you. Brett's a believer and I'm a skeptic. And the reason I'm a skeptic is quite simple. To offer a UBI of $1,000 a month, which, let's be real, doesn't nearly cover anyone's expenses, but $1,000 a month to all U.S. adults would cost more than $4 trillion. And we're talking about a U.S. government that currently owes $36 trillion. And the U.S. legislature has just increased that by another $3 billion. So we're looking at a government that is saddled with debt. Where on earth would you find the trillions necessary to issue a UBI?
Well, in my case, there'd be a lot of different ways. We would probably try to lease out federal land. We'd probably try to raise tax on the billionaires. But let me just say also that, $1,000 sounds wonderful, even though it's not enough. But in California, if we could get to 500 or even less, I would do, if it comes down to doing $150 for every single person, I would do that. What's important to me is not necessarily that we provide for people up front right now. It's that we break this idea into the door and we get it. And then eventually we build upon it as a society. And I think that's the only realistic way to actually get this through the assembly and things like that. We're going to have to do something
a moment ago, you said,
to begin with.
a moment ago, you distinguished yourself from Zohan Mandami in New York, who is a social democrat, and you said you're not a socialist. But what you're saying is you want to tax billionaires and redistribute the income to other people. Isn't that the definition of socialism?
No, I think so many of my other policies aren't socialist. It's really just this is one. So, we have and we can get into this now if you wish, the automated abundance economy, which is really the new model of my gubernatorial campaign, as well as where I'm looking at economics for California. And it's this idea that we can do a lot with robots. We can recreate the American dream. Partially based upon a universal basic income, partially based on robots in our houses and taking our jobs and doing things for us that make our lives more leisurely. I think one of the most important things is I'm not trying to continue the capitalistic system as it is right now. We are trying to really redefine the American dream. But I don't see myself like Mandini. I really don't. I see myself as wanting the billionaires to make money and continue to contribute to society and let capitalism do its magic. But at the same time, it just can't be that capitalism completely leaves 50% of Americans behind, which is really what's happening. You've seen the inequality growing. So we need a bridge between socialism and capitalism. Not sure what that name is, automated abundance economy, but we need a bridge.
I think the important thing to identify here, Zoltan, and you maybe this is sort of the messaging, is that it's not that we want to create a highly autonomous socialist, economy. That's not really the objective either. But the fact is, we've never had the ability to apply this level of automation in society that's going to disrupt the core function of wealth distribution in the economy, which is giving you work. That's the only way the economy can distribute wealth today, is give you a job or give you a handout, right? And if we can't give you a job because robots are taking it, then, we need a different system. And it's not necessarily that we're going to go back to socialism or communism. It's the fact that, capitalism won't work. It's running out of the tools it needs to operate society in a meaningful way without there being large-scale problems, death, homelessness, food security issues and things like that. So it doesn't really matter what we call it. We're still going to have to transition. We need a net new system. And to sort of simplify it as socialism versus capitalism is part of the problem that we have in this dialogue. We need to upgrade capitalism. We need to figure out what comes next, because we've never encountered this before.
Okay, but confiscating someone's wealth and redistributing it to other people is socialism. Let's not joke around. That's what that is. I'm not necessarily against it. By the way, that might fit very well with my politics.
But why do we?
About the language we're using in the show.
I'm not sure taxes is confiscation of someone's wealth. You know what I mean? I'm kind of more. I would say that
paying your way,
contributing to society, so that the riots and the people with protests don't, pitchforks don't come after them. There's a balance.
Look, you're pointing to some future scenario that does not exist right now. There are no riots and pitchforks, right? That's a future scenario. And what you're saying is you want to do something preemptive.
But we've seen analogies for that, right? Even the industrial.
No. All right, let's get clear. Let's get clear. Brett, you're talking about a scenario that I think is a technological fantasy, which is that somehow we're all going to be displaced from our jobs. The fact is, right now, we are running at nearly full employment in the United States.
Yeah.
The fact is, right now, the capitalist economy seems to be working very well for most people. We're a wealthy nation. So where is this fear?
Quality of life. Quality of life.
Do you really think robots are going to do your housekeeping and have robots are going to move your furniture and install your plumbing? That's a fantasy.
Yes, within a few years, I think
robots are going to do your plumbing. All right, so you guys are you're living in the future, and maybe at that point there'll be a need for such policies. At this point, it's pretty clear that scenario is not true.
And Robert, let me just say, I have seen California change over the last 10 years. The inequality is grown so crazy. I mean, you can see it right now in the downtown LA, but it's also just, I went and gave a speech in downtown San Francisco and went through the Tenderloin district. I mean, it's just insane, the amount of homeless, the poor people, the drugs. So I have seen these things get worse and worse and worse in the last 10 years. I think.
Why do we still have homeless people?
Yeah, exactly. And these are the kinds of things that I think if it's not confiscation of wealth when you're trying to create a better society. Now, I'm not saying, we need to create, grocery stores that are run by the government. But I do think that someone who started to make hundreds of billions of dollars and things like that now owe it back to kind of create a world where we don't have homeless people, where people have to eat.
I don't think I differ with you politically. Here's my point on this. Why do we have billionaires? If you had an AI running, like redistributing wealth, the first thing the AI would do is say, gee, why is it that 1% of the world's population has more wealth than half the population?
It's super
That seems like an inequitable distribution. And probably the AI would do a more intelligent job of distributing wealth. But the argument against that from free market capitalists would be, well, now you're going to remove the incentive for innovation. You're going to remove the incentive for the risk takers and the people that ultimately create the jobs. How do you respond to that?
Well, I mean, can you go, Zoltan? I'll answer after you.
I think, someone like Mark Zuckerberg, let's just say hypothetically, if he's going to make 50 billion or he's going to make, let's say, 2 billion, he's still going to have plenty of incentive. I don't think incentive changes because you add the zeros to the billion. I think when incentive starts really maybe changing is when you tell someone you're going to have $15 an hour at McDonald's or $16 an hour. That's not much bigger. So I think we have to be very clear that billionaires will have incentive to go from 1 to 2 billion, even if they are just, that rich already. So I think that question, is a little bit of a curveball, I think.
Yeah, I think the argument that you need that type of incentive and that higher taxation is going to remove that incentive. It just the data just doesn't show that. I mean, previous corporate tax rates were in the 90 percentile range when the U.S. economy was its most innovative ever, right? Which was in the 1960s, post Second World War. So you can't argue that high taxation regimes aren't going to incentivize innovation in the capitalist economy. The data just doesn't show that historically. The only reason you'd argue that is that you've got people that have manipulated the system to reduce taxation on their corporations and on their assets, for their own purposes, and have sort of seeded policy with that, right?
Well, okay, don't get me wrong. I'm not advocating for that, but there are plenty of people who do advocate for that, including the people that run the United States government right now, and the people that the party that is in charge of two branches and arguably dominates the third branch of government.
I mean,
they're all for tax rates for billionaires, right? That is exactly their policy. That's essentially the major policy initiative of Trump, apart from deporting workers, immigrant workers. The major policy achievement of Trump's administration is to cut taxes. Same thing in his first administration. So, Zoltan, and what is your response to that as a candidate for governor, right? Here you would be swimming against the political mainstream, I think.
Yeah, no doubt, but certainly not against the mainstream in California. I mean, I know people personally whose jobs have been affected by this big, beautiful bill, and they're now scrambling. And, I know, I hear what you're saying. You're saying, great, America's at full employment right now. We seem to be doing great. But just because we're doing great doesn't mean we're going to be doing great next year. A lot of us are like super worried about all the consequences of what's happened with the Trump administration. If it was up to me, I would restore a lot of that funding, would stop the deportation process. I mean, you can make changes, and that's what happens when it goes from Republicans to Democrats. And honestly, I like democracy. But the way he's done it is just so like black and white that I think there's going to be huge recessionary consequences coming up either later this year or in the following year when everyone says, wow, we really don't have a job. That transition was too quick. And now we can't even get new jobs as all the college graduates are finding out because AI is essentially taking them all.
There is some pretty strong data right now that entry-level graduate jobs are under some pressure. I mean, it's only going to take a few months to tell. But hey, listen, Rob, I think we need to have a quick break. And
fun conversation so far.
It's good conversation.
Take a break. We'll be back in just a minute after this word from our sponsor. Hi, this is Rob Tursik from the Futurists podcast, which is part of the Provoked Media Network. I'm excited to tell you about some news. The Futurist is expanding into the real world. We're doing a live event in Dubai. Now, folks who listen to the Futurist podcast, you're going to be familiar with the fact that my co-host Brett King has been working very hard in Dubai and other parts of the Middle East for a long time. And for more than a year, he's been putting together this event. And now, with the help and support of MasterCard and Emirates MBD and many other partners, we are putting together the world's largest futurist meeting in Dubai. It will take place at the fabulous Jumeirah Beach Hotel in Dubai, and it'll be on the September 22nd and 23rd this year. So just a few weeks from now. The speakers are going to include some of the world's leading futurists and forecasters and future thinkers. People like Brian Cox and astronaut Scott Kelly. And of course, Brett and I will be there to conduct interviews and introduce some of the other folks. We've got speakers from around the world. And if you're interested in meeting futurists in person and participating in an event that attracts the future-minded, please join us on the 22nd and 23rd of September. You can learn more about it at futuristevent.com. That's futurist singular event.com. It's all one word, futuristevent.com. And that'll tell you all about the event. I sure hope to see you there in Dubai on the 22nd and 23rd of September. Thanks.
Welcome back to The Futurists. I am your host, Brett King, and with me is my good pal, Rob Tursek, in the co-hosting chair, all the way from California. Also in California is our guest, Zoltan István. In fact, he's running for governor of California, which is pretty cool. So, Zoltan, what we want to do now is we like to sort of try and get to know our guests a little better. So, we've got a few short, punchy questions that require short answers, just to get to know you a little bit better. We call it the lightning round. What was the first time you remember being exposed to the concept of the future as an area of study, maybe in science fiction or through media, that you can remember, Zoltan?
I think the most defining moment was really at Columbia University when I read an article on cryonics. That was a moment that changed my life. I realized there was an entire movement on Earth of people dedicated to overcoming death. There may have been earlier visions, but that's the one that I just constantly remember, even at night sometimes.
Now, this is going to be a great question for you. I'm really interested to hear how you answer it. Which technology do you think has most changed humanity?
Well, obviously, I think right now we have to admit that it's going to be AI. But I want to say just the internet in itself is really what has changed the world more than anything else I've seen. The reason is because we can all communicate with each other instantaneously all the time. And I think our brains were not designed for such a thing. And so we're finding a lot of chaos and the harmony is not always there because we're able to do this kind of constant communication all around the world. So I would have to say the internet right now is still the victor. AI will probably change that.
Top that, yeah. Name a futurist or an entrepreneur or engineer that has influenced you, and tell us why.
A good question. Listen, I hate to give the traditional answer, but I had Mike Cernovich at my Napa Valley winery the other day, and we were discussing Elon Musk. And I got to say, like, what I think Elon Musk has done for freedom of speech has really been important. But it's also all the space travel stuff like that. If we can't get to the skies, then I'm not sure where the transhumanism world goes. And I'm not saying I necessarily like him or anything like that. What I'm saying is that from an influential point of view, I have followed his work very closely and have strived to be a lot more entrepreneurial as a result of that.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Controversial figure, but clearly an excellent entrepreneur.
Yeah, he has pushed us forward. We need more Elon Musks. All right, last question. What science fiction story or what depiction of the future as a transhumanist is most representative of the future that you hope for humanity?
Well, I don't want to plug my book, The Transhumanist Wager, but let me just say it seems to me like it's really unfolding. You know, The Transhumanist Wager is the novel about a person who wants to overcome death at any cost. And it really wasn't my personal philosophy that I wrote into it. It was more just a challenge. And here, because we have somebody like Trump, who everybody's worried might become a dictator, worried they might start World War III, you know, that's almost a certain type of personality that I wrote about in my book. And it ends well for humanity, as most fictional and books do. But in the real world, that doesn't always happen. And so I just have to say that I have been in fact, and I'm grateful for this, rereading my own work quite a bit to try to understand more of what's happening in the modern world.
I applaud that, and I have to say, one of the coolest things about being a futurist, like when you've put some serious time into writing about this stuff, is when you go back and you read your stuff from 10 or 15 years ago where you got it right. That's really satisfying as a futurist. So. Yeah.
What's really amazing too is my daughters are just coming of age right now. I have an 11-year-old and a 14-year-old where they're starting to read my works and read. I can
cool.
read out loud the novels to them. They were too young earlier when I wrote it 10, 15 years ago, but so that's really been nice too, to try to introduce them to these strange ideas at night when you're putting them down to bed.
Zoltan, I want to explore this idea of narrative and the stories that we tell each other, because I think stories are super profound. Again, this is a topic that comes up frequently on this show. We have people talking about the future of narrative or the power of narrative. It's certainly true that as a leader, you can inspire voters with a powerful narrative. That involves a vision, but it also requires a kind of charisma to get the vision across. Now, right now, I would say the United States is dominated by a very dark vision. And it's a vision that something's been taken away from you. It's a politics of resentment. And the narrative that our president is currently selling is a narrative of retribution and revenge. It's a very dark chapter, I think, right now. You seem to be a more positive person. And like Brett always points out, futurists by nature tend to be optimistic, right? We're looking at the future. We're excited about the future. We're inspired to get to a future. Can you cast for us a more inspiring vision for the future of California? What would your narrative for the future of California be?
Sure. Well, I think my narrative is really that we're trying to push this new idea, which is automated abundance economy. And as we talked about, it pushes forth the universal basic income as one of its main things. The second one, though, we haven't spoken about, which is really, I think, very interesting. And if you look at the geographical footprints of buildings going out around the world, there's a lot of people building mega factories to produce humanoid robots. These are these 4 or 5 foot, 6 foot robots like the Tesla bot or whatnot that can hopefully fold your clothes, do your dishes, mow your lawn. And, people are promising by the end of this year, but probably not so soon, but sometime by middle of next year, some of the very rich will have them in their households, hopefully cooking or answering the door and doing some laundry or something basic. And of course, by the year after that, probably starting to really get improve themselves. The agility of these robots is just exponentially improving.
I have a robot vacuum.
Is your vision a robot in every home, just like a chicken in every pot, or a car in every
So our promise, my promise as a gubernatorial candidate is to either give or to lease one humanoid robot into every California household. And if we could do that, the main thing here is, everyone's promising money, but I'm actually promising something that will take away the time that you have to put to chores. Everybody wants a 5-star cooked meal. And if you have a robot that can do that successfully and serve it to you and then do the dishes, that really makes the world nice. If you have somebody that can walk your dog and clean up the poop, hey, that's great. Somebody that can mow the lawn. And this is what they're aiming at. Now, it may take 3 to 4 years to get to that level of humanoid robot being able to do those tasks, but that's about what my governorship would be, 4.5, 5 years from now. So if I could give every California household a robot, that would be my great gift to the state, and what the kind of picture I'm trying to paint as how much I can improve people's time. It's not just about giving them money. It's actually about giving people time. We spend about 10 hours a week on chores. So what would you do with those 10 hours? I'd go to movies, I'd read books, I'd do whatever I could. So a huge policy of mine is one robot, one household in California. Either give it or lease it. Do whatever you can to give every household one.
Let me follow up with another question then, because the question obviously comes to mind is, how do you pay for it? When Gavin Newsom took office, Jerry Brown left him with $100 billion of surplus in the bank. He's since squandered that. California now has a $15 to $20 billion structural deficit, and that's not even controversial. Even his own budget office, Gavin Newsom's own budget office, confesses that. So how would you afford to pay for a robot in every home?
Yeah, that's the trick question. Just like the universal basic income, it becomes very difficult from a numbers point of view. But I do believe that we could negotiate better terms with the federal government right now with how much we're giving to them. Gavin Newsom's correct. We are supporting a lot of the American world, American even its military and things like that. I don't want to be supporting all these militaries all over the world and things like that. So, there's some money. I would also stop the rail project in California. I just think it hasn't been successful. It gives a lot of negative energy. It would have been great had it been successful, but we could use that money for other things right now. And again, I think one of the things,
or we get the Chinese to come and build it.
Yeah, something like that. But when you talk about saving 10 hours a week for a Californian, that really starts making difference. What are they going to do with that? Maybe they'll work more, or maybe they'll do something else that is more meaningful to them. But the point is, if they have more time, they're going to have a better, more leisurely life. This is when you talk your original question, what's the California vision? Well, the California vision is that we want a more leisurely life for Californians. I don't want you to have to work so hard. I don't want you to have to work 9 to 5. I don't want you to have to take orders from bosses that you don't want. I don't want you to have to not be able to go on vacation abroad or even just to the national parks because you don't have enough money. We want to enable Californians to have that.
I don't even know why that would ever be controversial to say that, except people would say it's not realistic. But it's like, this is the promise that automation and robots and AI brings to us. And not only that, cancer-free and longevity treatments and all of those things. I mean, why wouldn't we have policies that gear us towards that sort of lifestyle? Isn't that been the promise of automation? What did we call Rosie the robot and the Jetsons, that sort of stuff? In the 60s, we were talking about labor-saving devices, the autonomy and things like that, because that's been the promise of AI for the last 60, 70 years.
So let me just tell you a dilemma that I have just this moment. When a robot would be really helpful. I have my 11-year-old sleeping next door, and she has to kind of stay in bed because she can't use the internet when I'm doing this podcast. But having a robot there to maybe start reading to her or start even doing things like that, and just even teaching her math or something that, okay, it's summer right now, but this is the kind of thing where I could really use this machine instead of her coming and potentially even bothering this podcast. She's just a young girl, but I think all of us in every single moment are going to find automation beneficial to our lives. So even if it costs the state a huge amount of money, I'm going to try to figure out a way to get a robot into every California household. I'm hoping, like NVIDIA just hitting brand new highs, the AI companies in California are going to generate so much money that they're going to be more willing to share it with the Californian people, that support them in order for all of us to have a better life. That's my goal.
Okay, Zoltan, related note, let's talk about the climate in California, because it looks like we're going to be having another hot year. By the end of this season, we'll start to have another spell of fires. There are already some fires have already broken out when we just had huge firestorms in January. So it seems like we never get a respite from that. You're a landowner. You have a vineyard, right? So you are personally exposed to the dangers of climate change. As governor of California, what policies would you enact to protect the environment and to get more support from the federal government?
Yeah.
Well, I think to begin with, it's incredibly difficult to change the climate through like just being governor of a state when China won't change, or, Canada, or not necessarily Canada, but let's say Mexico and other developing countries are really starting to kind of come into their own. I think what's important, though, in relation to fires and things like that, is we would try to use a lot more automation. I think, as they say, if you can catch a fire in the first 5 acres, you have a 90% chance of stopping it. So we would have a lot of new drones flying around, a lot of new satellite technology. In Napa, they finally put on cameras on a bunch of telephone poles that are geothermal. They're kind of like, they're thermal. They're designed to spot any kind of heat sensing imagery that changes. And we have one right by my vineyard. And this is the kind of stuff we need all across the state, so that the moment you get this imagery, a drone flies out, and drones can fly about 150 miles per hour now, and they can carry water. They can do all sorts of things. They can observe. They can also just kind of help the firefighters get there. It would like literally be a game changer in, maybe not with the LA fires, which were so much wind, but with maybe 90% of the other fires, you would be able to control those things. And so I think if we used automation to help fight fires in a real way, we're going to have to spend some money. And again, the question is, where does the money come from? But I think this is worth it. Fires cost billions of dollars of damage.
Yeah,
so that would be my response, is using automation, drone technology, to fight these fires. And to stop these fires before they even start. Of course, there's also basic things like we're not doing a good job of clearing up the forest, the brush, and things like that. I mean, we have to be realistic. I know we care about the hooted owl and things like that, and wolves, whatnot, but we also have to be realistic. These are people's houses that are burning, tens of thousands of them sometimes. So we need to do a better job of being a steward of the forests.
Okay, but let's think about it from this perspective. Californians continue to move further and further towards the natural areas, right? So this is the issue of the civilization and natural interface, right? So that boundary keeps getting pressed by expanding residential area, right? So people are moving closer and closer to the fire zone, essentially. Now, the free market has already told us don't build there, right? So the homes that are most exposed are those that cannot possibly get insurance coverage, fire insurance, and that's where the state of California has to provide a backstop. Originally, that was meant to be an insurance policy of the very last resort. However, today, an increasing number of homes and the majority of homes in the fire zone are covered by that. That means that we're just redistributing the risk away from those homes that are built in risky areas to the rest of the people in the state. Essentially, the taxpayers of the state are the backstop for people who are building out near the urban interface. What's your perspective about that? Would you put a moratorium on building further into the wilderness?
No, I would allow people to build. I think what I would do, though, is maybe have a special tax or a special assessment of some sort that if you build in those areas, you have to pay to have extra fire coverage and not coverage. I mean, extra like fire department coverage. We need more people in those areas, more drones and more technology. So if you're going to build in a really fire prone area, your house might have to be made of a certain type of material and you would have to pay something extra so that the fire department, maybe even establishing new fire departments. In fact, we have a policy where we would really be trying to increase the amount of both police officers and fire people all across the state. I know that costs a fortune as well, but I feel like you really can't have enough security and fire people when something breaks out. And these emergencies that happen cost so many billions of dollars, and so we need we need to stop them in their tracks.
The last wildfires were $300 billion
the numbers are
in economic losses, right? So it's like, even if you have to spend $10 billion on this stuff, it's still going to pale into insignificance. Zoltan,
absolutely.
Given we've got like 10 minutes left, let's go futurist, right? Let's go full futurist here. So, I want you to apply this to us today, your skills as a futurist, which we love, but apply it to what the future of California is going to look like, but not during your term as governor, but, in 30 years, in 2050, how has all of these things come about? Because by then it's enough time for these policies to be enacted and to work this stuff out. What do you imagine life will be like for a Californian in the year 2050?
Sure. Well, let me just start, a little bit doomsday-ish. We need to be very careful in order to get to that future 2040, 2050 in California, which I hope to be. We're going to have to make sure that super intelligent AI doesn't somehow go rogue and doesn't somehow become something actually dangerous to humanity. Now, like I said, I was at this End of the World AI party. There were a ton of coders there from ChatGPT and, everyone, OpenAI, Microsoft. None of them had a real good answer on what to do with superintelligence that we're going to create probably sometime in the next 3 to 10 years. Hard to know exactly when, but it seems to me that we're going to have an AI that's smarter than people and probably far smarter. And then it's really, I wrote like 6 essays at Oxford in the last few years on this. What do we actually do if this thing doesn't like us? And there's a lot of reasons it might not like us. It might not like us for what Robert's talking about. We're taking its resources. We're kind of destroying the planet. I got to be honest. That seems to be what humans do a lot of the times. And if we are taking so many resources, maybe an AI would say, I want those AI. I want those resources for myself. So let me just say that
you can't have air conditioning during the summer.
The first thing
I need to power my data centers.
The first thing we have to address is making sure that superintelligence doesn't go rogue. Now, let's just say, though, we get to use AI to our benefit and everything works out. I would say a real future of a person. They wake up, maybe let's just say they were a software coder and they can no longer code because AI does it. But there's a basic income in place. They have a roof over their head. Maybe they own a small home or they're living in one of the, 3D printed houses that have been built all over the state. I mean, these kinds of things that I would be pushing out. And they have enough money to fly to maybe the Bahamas to learn the guitar that week. Or maybe they enrolled into an online PhD program because they would love education. Or maybe they just want to hang out with their kids. I mean, I'm hoping not everybody's just going to sit at home drinking Coca-Cola, watching sitcoms. That is the Wall-E scenario. I hope that doesn't happen. I hope people will find ambition in themselves, even if they have a universal basic income, even if they don't work, even if they have a robot that does all the chores. But I think the American dream is going to be something of self-fulfillment. It's not going to be this, I want to become a millionaire. I think the new American dream, and it's also a California dream, is going to be really that we must find fulfillment in ourselves, in our communities, in the things we love to do. They're all things we want to do as a child. I want to be a pro surfer. Maybe there'll be anti-aging techniques that will be out there and I'll be a young 40-year-old again and I can try my hand at surfing if that was something that worked. But these are the kinds of dreams I would want people to pursue in the new California era, where automation really provides for most things that we would need.
Sounds pretty utopian, Rob.
I'm excited about it. I'm a huge fan of California. I've lived here for more than 30 years. I love this state. I love it. I love the natural environment, the oceans, the deserts, the mountains, the forests, the redwood trees. I love the cities. I love the countryside. I also love the fact that this state is always at the forefront of innovation, and that's not just technology, though that clearly dominates the conversation these days. You have to think about the music scene. Since the 70s, California culture has been at the forefront of the fine art world. Things like social media and gatherings and rock and roll concerts where people get together in new and novel ways. In terms of design, industrial design, California's always been at the forefront.
Yeah.
So this notion that maybe we're kind of on the left coast and the whole nation runs downhill, and sort of like the most odds and ends roll down the state to California, I think is an interesting place. It's like the end of the continent, the ocean, and the possibilities seem to open people's minds up to new things, new kinds of stories, new kinds of possibilities, new kinds of futures. And I would hope that we have a futurist governor, and I hope it'll be you. Frankly, I would love to see someone with a vision of optimism and sort of a spiritually informed view of technology.
And it'd be pretty cool because next time you come on the show, you'd actually be governor.
Well, and let me just say one thing.
That's all we care about.
With what Rob just said, I also think California can kind of lead the way culturally. If we could have all this automation really take place and start here, so many people have so much more free time to contribute to new methods of culture. So for me, that's one of the big dreams here too, is that we would have a whole kind of new renaissance of what it means to be alive. And so I'm excited about automation for that reason too. It's not just people have to stop working. It's what they're going to do with all that free time to create.
Fabulous.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, we didn't really talk about transhumanism much, a little bit. But I sort of think that the potential is that everyone becomes a transhumanist, because as we get more focused on longevity, I think what we're learning today about longevity, particularly with Brian Johnson's, experimentation in this and so forth, is longevity is going to be as much about those things you're talking about that change your lifestyle and change your behavior as it will be gene therapy and certain medicinal compounds and pharmaceuticals and things like that. You're not going to get that sort of health span that you're looking for in long-lived life without changing your relationship to how you train yourself, how you spend time being physically active and mentally active and things like that. So I think we need a transhumanist as a governor as well.
Well, yeah. But go ahead, Robert.
Sorry, Rob, go.
Yeah. So you're mingling two concepts there. One is modification of the body, right, for longevity purposes. But my understanding of transhumanism is it's about augmenting human capability, using technologies to augment us. In that respect, everybody on this planet is a transhumanist. I've never understood there to be any kind of conflict with that. Even someone who might be, let's say a deeply conservative religious person, that person is going to have eyeglasses or hearing aids. They might use a cane. They might use an automobile to get around town. They might use a television to see events that are happening on the other side of the planet. Certainly, they're going to use the internet to find information at their fingertips, probably on a smartphone. All of these things are extension of human capabilities, and in that sense, we're all transhumanists because we're using technology to transcend the limitations of the human physical form. Zoltan, I know I'm preaching to the choir here. In some respects, I'm preaching to the minister. Tell me more about this idea of transhumanism as a way to kind of transcend human limitations.
Well, I think just, clearly transhumanism is this idea of just changing the human being with radical technology. And the faster and the better and the more we can do it, probably going to lead to a more prosperous and better life. The number one goal, of course, is trying to end aging. And we'll see how if AI really helps that here in the next 5-10 years. There are some new drugs coming to market. But what I'm really interested in is a lot of the 3D printed synthetic organ parts that can actually keep people alive, and maybe even, augmentation of putting on a robotic arm and combining ourselves. I'm not so sure anymore about Neuralink and brain interfacing, because AI has become so powerful. It's a little scary to think of having that in my head. But what I want to do is become a cyborg myself to some extent and be able to, throw a football a mile long with a robotic arm at some point in the future, or at least maybe have some kind of stem cell injection that makes my arm the strength of an Olympian's. But these things we're at the cusp of them. I've been talking about it for years, and it seemed like a big science fiction concept. And now there are $100 million companies all over the world working on exactly these ideas over the next 5 years.
There are 26 commercial gene therapies in market right now, right?
Yeah, it's in the next few years, it's going to be wild. You're going to hear it in the news all the time, everything coming to market and what there is for us to try to become better human beings. And yeah, we'll definitely be transhuman beings by then.
Yeah, we need to get David Sinclair on talking about this stuff, actually.
Yeah,
that's the guest we got to get.
Well, that's
all right. Well, that's awesome, Zoltan. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, this has been a fun conversation. Thanks, Zoltan. It's been a pleasure. So, folks, you're listening to The Futurists, and this is our interview with Zoltan István, who is now a candidate for governor in the state of California. He has previously run for president as the head of the Transhumanist Party. So thank you for coming on the show. Zoltan, where can people find out more about you? Where can they go on the web to learn more about your perspectives and your campaign?
Sure. Well, my campaign website is zoltanistván2026.com. And of course, we always welcome donations. We need even small donations. $1 or $2 donations are great. The reason is you need a number of donations to get into the debates. The number that you get makes a difference. So you can go there, but also please follow me on social media, whether it's Twitter, Instagram. I recently joined TikTok, LinkedIn, all these places, Facebook. I'm everywhere. And we try to post at least 3 times a day. And we're doing a lot of interviews and meeting people. I go out all the time and just hand out my card and say, hey, what will make California better for you? So follow us, please. We're
people find out about your wine. Where can people find out about the wine from your vineyard?
Unfortunately, right now the wine can only be bought in Argentina because some of the rules in the United States. But we are, if you happen to be kind of lucky enough to be maybe at some of the talks and things like that, we are able to serve it, just not sell it. But you can find all my information about my vineyards. We have one in Napa Valley, Bordeaux, France, and as well we have a vineyard in Mendoza, Argentina. It's all under ZoltanIstvánVineyards.com, part of the ZoltanIstván.com website.
Super. Great having you on the show. Brett, such a pleasure to see you again after such a whirlwind trip you've been taking. And folks, you're listening to The Futurists. We remain grateful to our listeners, the folks that give us feedback and suggestions and comments on socials. If you like the show, please tell a friend about it. And the very best thing you can do is give us a 5-star review on the podcast platform of your choice. The reason for that is simple. It helps other people find the show, and we found this to be very effective. So a 5-star review would be incredibly useful. Since we're all out there asking for campaign donations on the show, yes. I figured I would chime in with my own. And then in the meantime, we'll be back next week with another person who is going to tell us more about how they're working hard to shape the future that they envision. Until then, Brett, we'll see you
in the
future. Well, that's it for The Futurists this week. If you like the show, we sure hope you did. Please subscribe and share it with the people in your community. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. That really helps other people find the show. And you can ping us anytime on Instagram and Twitter at Futurist Podcast for the folks that you'd like to see on the show or the questions that you'd like us to ask. Thanks for joining. And as always, we'll see you in the future.